everyone. I'm here with my old friend and Santa.
Really?
Yeah, I like the new beard. Yeah, that looks pretty good.
You know,
looks pretty good.
The interesting thing was I got called Papa Smurf.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna pick a Smurf to make fun of someone with,
Yeah.
you pick the coolest Smurf you could possibly pick.
And that's the
Papa
coolest
Smurf.
Smurf.
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I do think so.
That is one way to look at it. There are many other ways in which you can look at being called Papa
I tried to grow a
Smurf.
mustache once, but it looked like a baseball team. There was 9 on each side. I just can't do it.
Do I really want to introduce you to?
You don't have to.
So, yeah, I do. I think I do. I have Papa Smurf on my right hand side here, and I have Barry on my left. Hi everyone, we're back, and this time I've bought friends. On my right is Jason Brown, and on my left is Barry Blick, and both were instrumental in working with me on my campaign when I ran for the People's Party of Canada. And we thought it would be fun just to record one of our conversations. And we often do these at coffee shops, we do them at home. You know, unfortunately politics is everywhere, so no matter where you go, somebody always has an opinion, myself included. And we thought it'd just be fun to have a coffee, and if we were gonna have a coffee and just chat, that we would record it so that you could be a part of it. You guys want anything to add or introduce yourselves?
Some
I'm
of
Barry.
us.
I'm still the membership director of the PPC, but there's not a lot of activity in the local EDA right now. Although I think there could be some future activity, but not at the present moment. Jason.
I was never past the
Wow,
buck.
is this really uncomfortable, obviously, for you?
Welcome to my room. These two are forever harassing me. Do a video, do a video, do a video. We got to do this. Let's capture that. And I'm like, you guys get on the other side of this screen.
You do the video. Yeah.
And now they get a taste of what
Otherwise, we would be running.
I'm not running for anything.
I know, but it did.
Yeah, but that's past.
So let's clarify a little bit of this. Barry volunteered for his service with the PPC and Nadine's campaign. Unfortunately, I don't think I got a volunteer on there. It was a.
You did get a volunteer.
You're going to do this one, and you're
I volunteered him.
Yeah, I got voluntold. That's a better idea. I was voluntold.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Needless to say, we've had some interesting conversations around the coffee tables throughout the last kind of 8 months, and really, being the guy who typically films all of this for you guys, I really decided that we needed to have this recorded because the conversations that you two have and the conversations that I've seen you have with individuals. I mean, I'm just thinking back to Saturday night or something like that. We had some friends over, and you converted a liberal.
Yeah.
A very strong liberal
Oh,
conversion.
Yeah. I was told that I could win the liberal vote. I just had to get out there, and they just had to hear because it's misunderstanding, really.
You could win the liberal vote?
and it's media perception.
She can convince a 30-plus-year-old. I'm not sure how old he was, but a 30-plus kind of millennial-ish liberal into true freedom, conservative sort of values. I think that's pretty impressive. It only took 4 hours.
But that's a good point because freedom, I don't think the younger generation actually knows what freedom was like.
You know, what was interesting though was it wasn't about liberal or conservative. It was really about common sense solutions to the problems we have. It wasn't about right or left. It wasn't about conservative, liberal. Take away the names of and labeling, trying to label everything. Yeah. And it really was just a conversation about, here's the situation. What do you think? Well, if we were to do this, well, we've done that and it didn't work and it doesn't work. And really just bringing it back to how can we resolve some of the issues we have?
But I think that's the nature of conservatism, though.
But take away the labels, though. Because people go, they hear conservatism and they go, I'm not conservative, I'm a liberal. And they shut down before you even have a chance to open the conversation. So if you take away the labels and you just bring up the problem, here's the problem, here's the potential solution, and you're able to, you've got a dialogue, you've got an opening to have a conversation.
If you were to base your life on human experience and common sense, what would that be?
I understand. It's called conservatism.
That's right.
But to a liberal.
But conservatism is a bad word nowadays.
Well, it's been politicized, right? So
it's really hard to defend.
But it's been politicized. That's why it's been hard to defend, because as soon as somebody who thinks and identifies as a liberal hears that word, they'll walk out of the room. They don't even want to have the conversation with you.
Exactly.
We have to keep them in the room, so that they understand that to be a conservative it's not a label. It's not about a political identity. It's a philosophy. And here's how the philosophy transcends into the real world. And it's not so different from what you want as a liberal or more progressive. It's just a different means or method of how to get there. But if you can't have the conversation, then...
Well, let's look at some of the
There's no
things that
progress.
really aren't common sense right now. At least in our points of view.
All right, settle in for about, I don't know, 10 hours or so.
Well, seriously. So right now we've got problems with these blockades that are coming up. What's your view on those blockades? I think that's totally non-common sense.
It's anarchy.
It is.
We have rule of law in Canada, and nobody's enforcing the rule of law. We have a very, 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 very small minority of people who are just creating pure anarchy. And I'm going, we have laws that protect from against this.
So what is it that's preventing the police from making these moves? And it seems to be all over the place that the police are not making the moves to either subdue or stop the people who are actually breaking the law.
Well, it's worse than that, in my opinion, because it's not only where the RCMP getting their orders from, because they're getting their orders from somewhere. And if they're being told not to arrest these people, it's coming from higher up.
They should be independent though.
But they should be, but they're not. And we all know that.
Right.
But the bigger issue is, for me, we have people who are truly victims in this circumstance who are being arrested while the criminals are not being arrested and are able to act without consequence.
Right.
So you have a gentleman who goes out who does nothing more than clear away the blockages and the mess that's in the middle of the road, because he needs to get to the other side. And as a Canadian citizen, you have every right to have free passage on these highways. And we have laws, actually, in the criminal code and traffic laws that actually say that you are not allowed to block a road. And he's the gentleman who gets arrested, while the people who set them up and should have been arrested are the ones that get to just sit back and there's no consequence for them.
And that spurs them on to future blockades because they know that there's no consequence.
There's no consequence.
Yeah.
Right? It's anarchy. It's anarchy.
Yeah, well, what do you expect nowadays? I mean, you had Andrew Scheer in the House of Commons call attention to the issue, for Justin Trudeau, who's an absentee leader by all stretch of the means.
Well, he's back
as was
now.
his,
He canceled his trip to
as was
Caribbean.
his father, complete absenteeism.
Part of him's still vacant.
Trudeau in the West is a bad word, and we knew that when Trudeau came back in, it was going to be a bad word. But at least his father showed some leadership, whereas this individual has no leadership. But getting back to my point, though, where you've got Andrew Scheer highlighting the issue, and Justin's comment was,
disqualified.
I disagree with what he says, so therefore I disqualify him from having the conversation. At what point in time do we look at it and say, oh my God, Canada is now run by a little tyrant dictator in a communist regime? We have police that won't arrest criminals, and we have leaders that won't really lead and won't let any conversation happen to them. What's your take on that? Am I a little too harsh on there? Am I a born and raised Alberta? Oh my God!
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah.
And I didn't swear once.
Yeah.
No.
There's some blood coming down though.
Yeah.
Bit your lip. Hardly.
But we're full on communism now. And Barry, you brought up a thing of the National Geographic.
Yeah, 36 years ago in the National Geographic.
March 1984, National Geographic, a story.
1984.
1984, yeah.
Not George Orwell.
Not George Orwell's,
Yeah.
but National
But it's
Geographic.
National Geographic, March 1984, 36 years ago next month. The National Geographic came out with a story on Calgary and how Calgary was growing. It was an Olympic city. It was going to be an Olympic city 4 years from then. Ralph Klein was the mayor. Peter Lougheed was the premier. Trudeau was the prime minister. It was 3 years after the National Energy Program, which was devastating. That was Marc Lalonde, his energy minister. And it was 9 years after the start of Petro-Canada, which was the state oil company, which started in 1975. So the Saddle Dome had just been built. Lindsay Park Aquatic Center had just been built. It was a city that was on the rise. Mm-hmm. But there was this concern about socialism, and a real concern about socialism. And it's 36 years ago. 36 years from 1984, we're still looking at socialism. But now it's more like globalism, communism, progressivism. I lump those all into the same terminology. It is communism, and it's on our doorstep. What do we do now?
Yeah, the new religion is the isms of the world, right?
Do we want 36 years from now, when your daughter has children, and those children say to you, Grandma, what was it like to be free in 2020? What was it like? That's 36 years from now. Are we just going to go through this same process for 72 years and not do anything about it? Not defend our capitalist economy? And
well, that brings up a much deeper rooted issue, though, is I think especially more the younger generation don't truly know what a capitalist economy is, not from a free market perspective. Mm-hmm. It comes back to labels. You have governments who have very well-paid media sources that promote an image of what capitalism has done. But it's not capitalism that has destroyed our freedoms and our prosperity. It's actually been more and more government intervention that has created the problems. And as we move to more of a socialist society, we've seen more and more problems because they compound, right? So we're moving in the wrong direction. We're getting the wrong result, and the direction we're taking is taking us in the wrong result. But the media is very good, I think, at portraying that this is the problem. And it's like, well, no, actually, if you go backwards, you can see we had more freedom. We actually had less disparity amongst income, all of these things, when we didn't have the ability of corporations to go lobby a government and put rules and regulations into place that prevented the free market from actually working. Because what we have now is a bunch of crony capitalism. It's not capitalism at all.
It is.
I think it goes deeper than that, though, too. I mean, it's a fundamental. It's funny because the older you get, the more you look at the children and say, God, they're complacent and everything else. You realize I am younger than you. I know I might have a white beard, but I still am younger than you. I will highlight. You heard that. I'm younger than her. Damn it, she looks too good for that. But I mean, going back to what I was talking about, I mean, every time the generation looks at the next generation coming up, and they're like, oh, they're soft, they're weak, they're etc. But are we not really at a point though where the generation that's coming up younger than the like Gabby's age and etc. Where they're just inherently ingrained into this complacency, consumerism driven society, and it's me. Something has got to be fixed there in order to fix it up here. You can't fix the top and expect the base, your foundation, to still remain strong. I mean, you've got to do something.
That's part of the problem with government. Government has taken over education. right? The curriculum comes from a high level up here. It doesn't come from teachers and...
I think a problem too is that with education, people think that if education gets into private hands, that the kids aren't going to get educated. That's just not the case.
Well, they're going to get educated in a different way. The problem is the government wants to control education.
They
because
do.
Let's get these children at a young age. We can indoctrinate them into what we believe to be true.
We can remove the history that we don't want.
Let's go back to, forgive me, I mean, I know it's a little controversial, but the Communist Manifesto, and a big part of it was education. And the younger we could get children, the better.
Yeah, basically that's
right?
it.
It's indoctrination. It's not about education. Education was about pulling out of a child their strengths, identifying the weaknesses so that they were able to best use the tools that they possessed to function in the world. Today,
Exactly.
we're pushing children to do things that they're not interested in. I mean, here's an interesting statistic. Kids today, 50% of them are on some sort of medication.
Yeah. Wow,
Right?
50%?
50%.
No kidding.
Why?
I didn't know
Why?
that. Didn't know that.
Why? I mean, I know in our school when I grew up, which wasn't that long ago, despite your white beard, wasn't that long ago. I mean, we may have had, a little bit of attention deficit but I mean, that word didn't even really exist when I was going to school.
No, it didn't exist.
Now we have
in
ADD,
my
ADHD, we have this, that, everything else, and I'm sitting here and I'm going, what changed?
Yeah.
I can guarantee you in my class, there was not 50% taking some sort of prescribed medication so they could sit through a classroom for 45 minutes and then go into another, and we had physical education, we had art class, we had home ec. Why are we teaching kids like life skills? Here's how you cook your meals. It doesn't happen in the microwave on a daily basis. Here's how you balance a checkbook. Here's a budget. Oh my gosh. Imagine that.
Well, you can't teach kids a budget because the government has no idea what a budget is.
Well, that's just
They don't know
it.
what a
How
deficit
can they
is,
teach
they
a
don't know what a
budget when they
surplus
don't know what it
is, they don't
is?
know what a budget is.
But that's my point is, why is the government teaching kids at all anything outside of how to read, how to write, and math?
Yeah.
Those are the fundamentals.
Let's take away their lemonade stands.
Well, and they've done
That's just
that.
it. You can't have lemonade stands anymore.
They've
Let's
done
take
that.
away that free enterprise
You don't have it. You've got to have a
initiative that they
license.
got when they're 7 years old.
You got to have a license for
Yeah.
a lemonade stand. God forbid, there might be
Don't allow the
something
public
in the water.
a risk to go and stop at one of those lemonade stands.
I don't know about you. When I see a lemonade stand, I stop at that stand. I get myself a lemonade.
Yeah.
I know I might be taking my life in my own hands, but if I'm going to
that's
go, it's going to be with a glass of
Yeah.
lemonade. That's all it's to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, education has always been a private sector thing until very recently, and we've seen when that shift has happened, a decay. I think even in the quality of the education that children are receiving, and you're seeing that.
I'm going to change your terminology from a private to an individual and home-based, a family or community-based.
No, but it
'Cause
hasn't always
it hasn't been
been
run by corporations.
It hasn't always been home-based either. I mean, my parents went to a one-room school.
Yep, yeah.
Right.
But
It was a government
community-based.
school.
But it was community-based,
Community-based.
absolutely.
We hired the
and,
teachers.
And if my child has an aptitude more for arts, why would I be forcing sciences, when maybe, there should be option and choice in the education system. Otherwise, let's agree with what we have, and it's not education, it's called instruction.
Yeah, and I mean, that opens up the whole gamut of, should you be going to university? Should you be at trade school? Should you encourage the arts? Should you not? I mean, it's just...
It should be
the
a
gamut's
personal
open, but-
decision, and we've taken that away from people.
Well, every time the
by
government
taking
gets
choice
involved
away.
in these things and directs them, just with even getting involved, you've already predetermined an outcome, which is going to be excluding, thank you, another point of view. Because, I mean, that's the problem. When you get these bureaucrats, and I was a bureaucrat at one point in time, and they have their mindset and they say, we're going to do it this way. Well, their blinders are on. They don't necessarily see what's happening out this way. Whereas that's the role and responsibility for the parents to choose, the child to be involved in, and the community to get involved in. It has nothing to do with government. Well, maybe there's some basic standards. You have to be able to read. You have to be able to write to a certain level. That's about it. And math. Fundamentally, that's it. We don't need...
Well, there are some other ways that you can actually run the school system. It doesn't have to be, you can do it with vouchers and that sort of thing. But that's a discussion for another time, I think,
Oh, completely.
education.
Completely.
But, and I gotta say, I agree with the voucher system, where you take your voucher and you can go to any school you want, and the schools compete for your business. And I think that's a really good, why do we say that competition is good? Yet we don't allow competition in medicine, we don't allow competition in schooling. I mean, competition's good. We don't allow it even in the post office. Let's get competition working for us.
Yeah.
To lower prices too.
Let's
Better
circle back
service.
though, because you're right, Barry. I mean, that's a conversation we could sit here and talk
Yeah,
about for hours.
exactly.
I mean, for me, what I thought was fascinating is the conversion aspect of the Liberal on the weekend, and this whole sense of this whole kind of communism, socialism impact that's happening in Western society. I mean, what were some of the things that convinced them that you said?
I don't think it was anything that I said particularly that convinced him. I think it was really the dialogue and discovering that we actually have more similarities than we have differences. Because this is what's happening today. We have a government that's politicizing everything. You have a political correctness where people are afraid to actually tell people what they actually think and feel. And we're shutting all that dialogue down. So it just becomes very polarizing. So if you can open the door to the fact that we actually have more similarities than we have differences, thus trying to take away some of the labels and isms, he had, you said liberal, but his idea of liberal wasn't that different than ours. But when you could actually have the dialogue back and forth, when he would bring up something and I could bring up a slightly different perspective on the same problem or issue and go, well, we've tried it that way, or history has shown this to be the end result of that action. And yet if we look at this, and then it was like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it that way. Right? So, people are now open because we're working together to find a solution to a common problem, as opposed to, okay, well, you're this and you're this, so we've got to fight each other. Trudeau is a perfect example. It doesn't matter what Andrew Scheer says. He could come out and agree with him. But because it came out of Andrew Scheer's mouth, he would never, ever go for it.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here and I'm going, that's ridiculous. We've got to get past all this nonsense and start doing what's right.
I think a lot of people look at liberalism and conservatism, if you want to take the labels for a second here. They take the two, liberal and conservative, and say, I am politically or economically conservative, and I'm socially liberal. Like, what does that mean? What does that really mean?
You believe in helping your neighbors and your fellow man,
so do we.
etc.
But so does conservatives.
So does a conservative.
But they want to keep the liberal thing it's like
what if,
affordable housing. It's like, just an example, affordable housing. There's no such thing as affordable housing. There is inexpensive housing, but there's no affordable housing. So how do we get inexpensive housing to house people rather than affordable housing? That's the difference.
I think what it really boils down to is, who do you want to have making your decisions? Who do you want to have in charge? Because for some reason, people have put the government in a position where somehow they're smarter, more informed, better to make decisions than we are. And yet when I look at it, and I've worked, in for the military, and I've, worked for government, and I look at it and I go, these are just people. They are people like you and people like me. They don't know any more than we know. Sure, they get access to some different information, but they're not any smarter. They're not better educated. There's none of that. So do you want them making your decision from Ottawa, which is however many thousands of miles away? They don't know your personal circumstances. They don't know your family, your daughter, your son, your relations. You don't know what you have, what you don't have. Do you want them making the decision, or do you want to be the one who is empowered to make the decision yourself? And I think that's really fundamentally what it boils down to. People go, oh, the government should do something about that. To me, that just simply says, well, I'm incapable of making that decision for myself. That shows a level to me of immaturity. And if that's the case, move home.
Yeah.
Move home. Let your parents make the decision for you. At least then
right.
it doesn't impact me.
Yeah.
Because as an adult, I am willing not only to accept, make the decision, but you also have to then be willing to accept the consequences. And I think that's the difference.
That's
is
your
when
personal responsibility.
That's just it. But when it's the government, I've got somebody to blame. And I think that's part of the problem today is it's not about them. It's not about out there. We have to start looking internal and inside to go, what can I do to make a difference? What can I do to make a change? If you don't like what's going on environmentally, what are you doing? Are you reducing, are you not running out to buy the next Apple iPhone, for example? Because that consumerism is what's destroying much of the environment. We're putting a lot of garbage out there, plastics. What are you personally doing? Are you not drinking from plastic containers? Are you using recycled containers? Are you using the steel straw? Are you carrying your plastic straw right in your purse?
They did a study on glass bottles for beer and for aluminum cans. Mm-hmm. And aluminum cans are far more expensive and less damaging to the environment than glass returnable bottles. And the reason is that the transportation of those bottles back and forth actually causes more carbon dioxide than the actual recycled aluminum.
The weight of the aluminum versus the weight
it's
of the glass.
Yeah.
Right? The only downside is then you've got more contact with aluminum, which that's going on to a whole health topic, which I don't think anyone
they
cares
actually
about.
line
Right? So.
They actually line tins. There's a YouTube video on those aluminum cans, which is just spectacular as to how the technology that went into an aluminum can and how it's made, and it is lined so that your beverage doesn't touch any aluminum. So.
Well, and the point for me is whether we're having a discussion about aluminum or glass or this or that is really we need to be able to have the discussion. And you have a media today that is bought and paid for by a government who has one position and is shutting down conversations like this that need to be had. So if you can have an open dialogue, and it doesn't matter where you're coming from, set aside all the labels and just go, here's the problem. Everybody contribute to what the potential solution is. Right. And I can present data honestly and fairly, and you can present your data honestly and fairly, and we can have that honest conversation without determining what necessarily the outcome is going to be until after we've had the conversation.
Or being afraid to actually talk about a subject too. That's another thing. There's things that we can't actually talk about here. We can, but we have the threat of...
it's controversial, right? Yeah, so people will automatically, turn off
but
or shut off, or the haters send their comments and notes.
That's fine if they do that. It's when the government comes down and says, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Or it's like the telephone company listening in on your conversation saying you can't talk about that, because that's what Google and these other companies are doing. YouTube.
Siri.
They're actually, Siri.
Siri.
Yeah, Alexa.
three phones just lit up over there.
That's right. So when you do that sort of thing, it's listening to you. So I don't like that is happening in our society, that we've got a monitoring going on. I can see monitoring for terrorism and that sort of thing, but the thing is, this kind of thing that we're talking about is just day-to-day things that are happening in our lives.
Yeah,
some things we can't talk about.
There's the symptoms, right? And we can go on and on about the symptoms.
Exactly.
And then there's the cause associated with it. And I mean, you hit on it. It's the fact that there is lack of leadership at all levels. There's individual leadership, individual responsibility. But yet, if you don't have individual leadership or responsibility on yourself, how can you ever expect our leaders of this country to actually do that? I mean, they can't have a conversation together. You mentioned this. I mean, you can't have a conversation together with another leader of a political party. God forbid you ever agree with them. A true leader will listen to all sides, find the best solution, and agree where it makes sense. When was the last time you ever heard agreement in the House of Commons?
Well,
So
but this is part of the problem with the democratic system that we have is it's broken. Our parliament is truly broken, and it's just been, I think, compounded over the last number of years with Trudeau. And I mean, and it's interesting because, we elected in a prime minister who kind of showed his true colors really in the last 4 years, and now he knows he's got the next little while, and he's absent, he's not here, but whatever he says, he does the exact opposite. And I'm a firm believer in, I don't care what you have to say, I care about what you do, right? Actions speak much louder than words. Mm-hmm. And the promise was to balance a budget. That never happened. We're further in a deficit situation than we've ever historically been. Promise was greater transparency in the House.
There's more consolidation in the PMO office now than there ever has been.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Took a little break there, refreshed some drinks, and we left off, I do believe, talking a little bit about leadership, if there is such a thing in this country. And there's leadership on a different number of fronts. Obviously, we've talked about some of the federal leadership problems, and we also, I think, have some provincial leadership problems too. So I'm going to throw it out at you guys and see what you kind of think about leadership or lack thereof in Canada.
I think leadership's dead. I think the last time we had a leader in this country, whether it be on a provincial, municipal, or a federal level, and I almost hate to say it, was probably Diefenbaker. That was the last time we had anyone who had some true leadership.
I think Justin's father had some leadership. It's just that his values just didn't go along with mine. But he was a leader for sure.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, I know I said it earlier too. That at least he showed some leadership. But was he a true? Like when I think of a leader, I think of like the historical. George Washington, Winston Churchill. I mean, true leaders. We don't have any leaders nowadays.
You have to be careful though too, because a wartime leader is different from a peacetime leader.
Like Churchill.
Yeah, right? Yeah. There's different, I think you need different types of leaders in different scenarios.
Hence why I said Diefenbaker.
Well, yeah, so that's my point, right? So it's just, I think there's different leadership styles that come to the forefront in different times. Mm-hmm.
Do you see any leaders that we have in this country? Is there anyone in the spotlight that might emerge to either run the CPC and put it back on course, or B, could not take over this country, because we know that's exactly what Justin's trying to do. But at least, stand up and be a leader for this country on an international scale. I mean, everyone laughs at Justin.
I ran as a candidate for the People's Party of Canada, so I thought that Maxime Bernier was the only person who I saw who possessed any true leadership skills from a standpoint of, not playing the whole political party game so much as is, we've got problems, let's fix the problems, willing to discuss them, debate them openly.
But he also had over 300 people that, if elected, would have moved the Conservative agenda. But the thing is, even a leader at the CPC, it doesn't matter how charismatic, he's got all those people there that are still sort of have one foot in the left camp.
Well, the problem with anything is so there's a difference between leadership though and party.
Right.
Because if you look at the parties have their ideologies. Heaven forbid you challenge the ideology, or now you're coming up against a belief system, or we don't stand for that, or whatever it is. So for me, I look at it though, there's leadership and then there's the party. Dr. Leslyn Lewis,
I think so, yeah.
Running for the Conservative Party of Canada.
Right.
Not that I dislike her, but the Conservative Party of Canada, I think, is broken. And how do you fix that? That's not a leadership issue, I don't think, because it's like saying, well, if we just vote this prime minister in, well, that's going to fix the whole civil service.
Well, I think the Reform Party intended to change that, years ago. Tried to change that. And then they merged with the Conservative Party, the Progressive Conservative Party, to become the Conservative Party of Canada. Did things really change for the Conservative Party of Canada to the or from the progressive conservatives to the Conservative Party candidate? Did things really change after the emergence of the Reform Party?
But again,
Party politics is
it's party politics. I think party politics is just broken. I mean, I'd like to see more leadership. I think the problem is it doesn't matter how great a leader you have right now in the traditional parties. The political party system is broken. So I personally wouldn't mind seeing politics come back down to more of a local level. Why doesn't everybody take the time to get to know who's running in their area, their district, and vote for the person who best represents them? Why don't they then go to Parliament and elect a leader from there, for example? Just one example as to how we could make some changes, get away from this leadership kind of debate, and the people themselves that have been elected can then choose somebody to lead Parliament, not lead a party.
Yeah.
Right? Because this whole fighting, infighting,
Maybe
back and
we're
forth.
talking about a republic.
Oh.
You know?
That leads me to wonder then, if we're talking about a republic, what about Alberta?
Yeah, exactly.
What about Alberta?
Is Alberta dead? Does Alberta survive?
Alberta's always going to survive.
But are we going to survive within Canada, or are we going to flourish outside?
No, so there's a difference between surviving and thriving.
Exactly.
Right?
Or do we intend to thrive, or do we intend just to survive?
The MP for the islands and Kingston.
Kingston and the islands, yeah.
Right, who has
Garrettson.
decided,
Garrettson.
to take it upon himself. This is a member of Parliament who's decided that the Tech Frontier project shouldn't go forward. And he has a Facebook page, and he's pushing out a survey for people to sign a petition stating that it shouldn't move forward. I have a question for you. I don't even know whether or not Eastern Canada, or what we call Laurentian Canada, even believes that Alberta is a part of Canada. Like, are we Canadians as Albertans? Because we're certainly not being treated that way. I think if anybody were to treat Quebec or Ontario the way Alberta has been treated, you'd never hear the end of it.
Yeah.
You'd never hear the end of it. The media would be all over it, and here the media is quiet unless it's to say something bad or negative about our oil and gas, and yet we're importing oil. There's oil going up the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Right.
There's projects that are happening in Ontario.
We're importing oil from mass murderers, literally, and we're okay with that. But we're starving the economic engine of Canada.
Yeah.
Oh, this is just it. Canada is to realize, like, where you've got all these social programs now. Who's paying for them?
Well, you and I.
But how?
Well, technically, only Alberta is.
How?
Yeah,
And now
the
we're
thing
borrowing
is-
money to do
The
it.
thing is, that's what it's becoming for Albertans, is how? Why are we paying for the $600 billion since 1968 or something? $640 billion that we've
Oh, the transfer
contributed.
payments equals.
Yeah, and transfer payments that we've contributed to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's unconscionable that the government is
Well,
treating us like, not just the government, it seems to be the people. The people are voting for governments that want to alienate Alberta.
Well, you and I are different this way. I mean, I noticed it this year that, when I'm away and I'm traveling in other countries and people ask where I'm from, I tell them I'm from Alberta. I don't tell them I'm from Canada. Mm-hmm. Right? And I mean, being a born and raised Albertan here and being grown up through separatism, and I would have to say I am not a federalist by any means. You, on the other hand, obviously running for federal politics, are a federalist. You believe in the concept and the ideology that is Canada. But can it really work, that East-West divide? Is there a way to bring it together?
Well, I wouldn't say. You use the word federalist. I don't view myself as a federalist, but we have to be realistic. Right now we are a part of Canada, so we have two choices. We can attain more autonomy as Albertans by simply using our provincial jurisdiction and taking some steps that say, you know what, we don't like how we're being treated, and we are going to take steps A, B, and C because
So what steps?
Well, for me, you can't do anything until you control your own money, right? Right now, Ottawa collects all of our money, and they give it back to us.
What do you mean money? Taxes?
Taxes.
Okay.
Well, actually, they donate it too to other
Right.
provinces, like
But-
they're the big benefactor.
No, but stop. It's not even that. Is how can I make any decision for myself personally if I don't even control my own money supply? Right? If I'm getting paid, but you're receiving every dollar that I make, and you're saying, well, Nadine, if you want this back, you have to negotiate for it, or what? I'm like, I have no control. I have no power. I'm beholden to you to say, oh, can I please have $5? Because, that's a parent-child relationship.
Well, that's what we have with Alberta, with
That's
the federal government.
currently
right now.
what we have with the federal
So
government.
there's the newest meme that's going to come out. It's going to be Justin Trudeau as the father, and you're going to have Jason Kenney as the child or in the
Yikes.
diaper.
Oh,
That's the new meme.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. He's begging for our own money back. So, this is where, for me, the very first step that Alberta has to do, and Jason Kenney could do this tomorrow, is put the federal government on notice. Effective January 1st, 2021, Alberta will be collecting its own taxes.
Period. Not
When-
just its own taxes.
No, but-
it would be collecting all.
Stop. Don't make it complicated.
Yeah.
Don't make it complicated. Keep
Yeah.
it so simple. The baby can understand.
Yeah.
Effective January 1st, 2021, we will collect our own taxes.
Mm-hmm.
At least now we have revenue, we have income, we've taken back some control and some power. Now if the federal government wants something from us, they have to come ask, rather than us go and beg for what is already ours to get it back. If they want something, they have to come ask for it.
Okay, what else?
So in other words, we'll be like Quebec and collect our own revenues.
We'll be
Yes.
like Quebec, collect
and
our own
give
revenues,
it to Canada.
No, every
after
province could do
negotiation.
this.
right?
Okay.
Every province could
Every
do
province
this.
can do
So
this.
that's one
right?
thing we can
but
do
But
right
you
now.
have a
What's
bunch
the-
of people running around in Alberta talking about separation, and they're going, yeah, I'm not saying that you take that off the table, because the way we're being treated, honestly, I think that could potentially be an outcome. Justin Trudeau has not made it easy for Alberta, and he has shown no remorse in any of his actions. He showed no empathy, no sympathy, and worse yet, now you've got like these MPs running around in Ontario that are behaving in the exact same way. It's like, hello, are we not your fellow countrymen? Do we want to boost each other up? Or is it you want to tear each other down? And part of the problem with, I think, Canada as a whole is we have an Eastern economy and a Western economy. And when the Eastern economy is doing well, the Western economy typically is not. And when the Western economy is doing well, the Eastern economy is typically not. So you've got this dichotomy that's already creating tension.
Yeah, one's commodity based, the other one is manufacturing based.
Right?
So
One relies on a weak Canadian dollar, and we functionally in Alberta are more tied to a US dollar.
yeah, we transact in the U.S.
Right.
dollar. I mean, whether it's oil, whether it's our grain resources, or our timber, and etc., it's all U.S. dollar based because that's our largest export.
Right?
Right.
So, because
Right.
God forbid the rest of Canada would want our exports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're more than
Quebec
happy.
doesn't want Alberta
they're more
oil.
than happy to take it from people who kill people than they are from
Right.
their own country.
Right. It appears that way.
Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah. No, yeah, and you're
There's my
absolutely
So
soapbox.
what else
You're
can we
right.
do? Pension.
that was two so far. You've got
Yeah.
two. You said there was three.
Well,
Three
no,
things.
I mean, there's a multitude of things, but I'm going, you can't do anything until you control your own money. Right? That to me is the number one thing right then and there. And that sends a very serious message to Ottawa that says, okay, when we have to go ask for it to get it back, that's a different story than us taking it and then giving it back to them. Now they are on the receiving end of the negotiation. We hold the power, right? Because that's really, it seems to me like the only thing Ottawa wants from Alberta is our money.
Yeah.
Right? So if we take back control of that, then we actually gain back some control and some power to be able to negotiate for terms. And whether they do or they don't is irrelevant. Then you can take the next step, right? And there's some
Well,
people
we don't have to do these things one at a time. We just say on January 1st, 2021, we're taking our right back
Yeah.
to collect our own taxes.
Exactly.
We're taking our right back to collect our own money, and we want the capital that is in the Canada Pension Plan.
Don't
moved
even
over
bring
to
Canada
Alberta.
Pension
We
Plan
want it.
into it for now if you don't want to complicate it. But here you have, let's go back to resources.
Yeah.
It is very clear in the Constitution who is responsible for the development of the resources. That is a provincial
That is.
decision, unless it comes into the interests of Canada, in which case then the federal government can intervene and say that, 9210, right?
Yeah.
We can build a pipeline across the province because it is the best interest of Canadians.
Yeah.
Well, why are we dependent
That's
upon...
infrastructure, though. That's not necessarily resource development.
No,
That
no,
is an infrastructure project.
Absolutely, but you've got Tech Frontier. I'm going. It's
That's
an
a
Alberta
resource-
project.
It's a resource development
So
project.
why is it that we're not saying, yeah, this is a provincial project, a provincial jurisdiction. This
Exactly.
has nothing to do with the federal government.
Yep, I would agree.
So why are we even having the discussion? You know what? Let's move forward. Let's move forward. Where is Jason Kenney and our leadership here provincially in making some bold statements and positioning Alberta within the Constitution and the rights that the province already has,
Exactly.
and start doing something?
Like taking control of our own police.
We
It's
can,
the same thing. Those are the same things. These things are like Ontario has its own police force. Quebec has their own police force. So does Newfoundland.
yeah, but
Labrador.
until
Well, you know-
you control your own money,
Right.
it doesn't matter that you've got your own pension plan, you got your own this, you got your own. If we keep sending all of Albertans' money to Ottawa first,
Right.
therein lies a problem.
That is the problem.
Alberta has to collect its own taxes, and don't call it revenue. Please don't call it revenue. It's not Alberta revenue. It's, let's be honest, it's a tax collection.
Yeah.
Right? So the people in power need to remember that it's not their money, it's our money that they're spending.
So are you saying that Alberta has the right to collect only the Alberta portion of the tax, not the federal tax? What are you saying?
You'd have to
What does Quebec do? Does
we do
Quebec-
that though now. We
What does Quebec
collect
do?
the Alberta portion, and I mean, if you're a corporation,
No,
we
the
gotta
federal-
check.
the federal
No, but if we're-
government
but if
collects
you're
both.
but if you're
It's
a
not-
corporation and you have to pay your Alberta corporate tax, where do you write it to? You write it to the Alberta Treasury Board. It goes to there. It doesn't go to Ottawa and then come back to it. But what we need to do on the individual level is everyone pays their taxes to Alberta first. All of it. Federal, provincial, everything goes
Exactly,
there.
exactly.
Gas tax, everything
Yes.
goes to the Alberta
Yes.
government
Yeah.
first.
Yes, I agree
and
with
then
that.
from
So we need to
there,
separate
we can
them
send
out.
it back.
Yeah.
I just don't think that we have leaders or an individual in power that would ever even consider that.
You mean, you don't
Jason
think Jason
Kenney.
Kenney would
God,
do
no. Jason Kenney's been a federalist and he wants that prime minister's job. So any time that he wants to stand up for Alberta,
Yeah.
he's going to be sticking it to Ontario and Quebec, and that's where his votes are. So he will never, ever stand up for Alberta.
Well, he knows.
was not the leader originally, and this is what I said before he even came and got the nod to run as the leader for the UCP.
Yeah.
He was never the right person for that role, and he will never be the right person for Alberta.
I'm surprised at where the UCP has gone, actually, since their amalgamation with the Wild Rose. I mean, we thought that they were actually going to move a little bit to the right, and I think everybody did, would hope that they were going to move a little more conservative than they were. But really, there's no change between the former Progressive Conservative of Alberta than there is with the UCP as it is today.
What
Well,
do you
they-
think?
they-
Are we out to lunch? Are we too strong?
No, the UCP and Jason Kenney align themselves with the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yes,
so
they
we
do.
know where their allegiance lies. I disagree that Jason Kenney's not doing something for Alberta. I mean, I think he's doing what he thinks is right. And he is a federalist, and I do believe, honestly, he probably does have ambitions to be the prime minister. So will he actually take the necessary steps? I think the bold steps that need to be taken for Alberta, probably not. Probably not. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, then that's just my opinion. But
Can
Alberta,
afford to wait?
and we can't. And I truly do believe that too. I mean, I attended a number of the Fair Deal panels and listened, and I have yet to have somebody provide, and I'm not saying I'm a separatist. I've had some people say, oh, you're a separatist. No, I'm not actually. I have lived all across Canada. I grew up in Labrador. I've lived in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. So we have covered the Atlantic provinces, the Maritimes. I live in Alberta. I've lived in BC. And we have fundamental differences. That's why we have provinces. That's why the provinces were given the bulk of the power, actually. And then you had, at one time, this light little federal layer over top that were supposed to make things easy for the provinces and for us to do interprovincial trade and to help one another out. And now we've got the federal government that has become the bigger of the two, the one that has all the power, and the provinces have given that power up.
Oh, yes,
it's not even that the federal government has taken it. The provinces have actually given it
They
up.
have given it up, yes.
So they need to
In
take
fact,
it back.
they've had to
Quebec,
sign it.
everybody's so angry with Quebec. And I sit back and I tell Albertans all the time, why are you angry with them? You're angry with them because they did what we need to do. They said, we are Quebec,
Yeah.
we are our own province,
Right,
and we will handle our own affairs.
exactly.
They negotiate with the federal government in a very different way than we negotiate with the federal government. And that's what Alberta needs to do. Instead of, looking at them and seeing, being mad about it, we need to look at them and go, that's how they did it, and do what they did.
Yes.
And I think if you take separation off the table as a real, because it's a very real threat here right now. I mean, if you've got 25% of people that are that upset, and I've talked to people who would never have ever dreamed of even saying things like that.
Nadine, I don't think I would take separation off the table. I think I'd always have it right here. It's this, everything else we take back control of, the things that we can take back that we have relinquished to Ottawa before, and let's take those things back as soon as we can.
Yeah, and there's things we can be doing tomorrow.
Yes, exactly. We could do them right away.
Yeah, we don't need a fair deal panel to tell us that we should be collecting our own taxes.
No,
Let's do it now.
exactly.
Every province should be. I
Yeah.
mean, don't get me wrong. Again, I'm not being a federalist.
If the tech frontier, if the Trans Mountain Pipeline gets delayed, and that's a 10-year program. That's been there for 10 years. I mean, can you imagine, how long tech would take? And it's been 10 years on the books.
It's more dangerous than that, because if this project is rejected,
Yeah.
the federal government has made it very clear there will never be another major infrastructure project or resource project in Canada. Resource
Exactly.
project in Canada again.
Especially when it's involved.
And I mean,
Right?
the
Well,
policies alone,
resource
though.
project.
So, I mean, the policies alone. You bring up a really good point. If it doesn't get approved, there'll never be a resource project developed in Canada again.
No.
And if it does happen in the east or something like that,
Yeah.
then you definitely have a schism that's going to occur.
It's a two-tier
But
system.
there's also with Trans Mountain, there will never be another infrastructure project done. So separating out resources and infrastructure, Canada functionally will be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We're at least at a minimum closed for business, and there will be no capital invested here. Again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think the only way for us to fix that is each individual province to take back their individual rights, collect their own money, and give it back to the federal government as they see fit once they've negotiated.
With
That will give
conditions.
us a proper role of the federal government and a proper role of the provincial government. Am I right?
No,
Am I wrong?
and that's what it boils down to. What's the proper role of government? So you have municipal government, which has a role to play. You have provincial government, which I think should have the biggest role to play provincially. And then you have the federal government, which should be very small, in my opinion, and very restricted in its powers. And it should be about addressing affairs for all of Canada. Like, get out of the province's business. Just like the government should be out of people's business. It's none of your business,
So how do we
what I
fix
do
it?
personally.
What do we need to do? I mean, we know you mentioned on Alberta, but how do we fix Canada?
Well, look, there could be, you could just say, okay, how many people do we have in all the provinces in the existing legislatures? And let's take half of those representatives that
Who do
are
we
in
put-
in the legislature.
Who do we put
and
in
make
power
them federal
to
representatives.
fix Canada?
I don't think we have anybody today.
Max can't do it.
I think Max.
You can't do it?
Well, no, this is where for me, I see things differently. The representation in Parliament it's weighted too heavily on Quebec and Ontario. So if we are going to be provinces that are equally represented, then we have to find some way to have equal representation. So I think that's
Constitutional reform.
Constitutional reform. And I'm sorry, but everyone's, oh, it's the Constitution. You know what? I know it's hard. But nothing in life comes easy, right?
The problem is
And we can fix it, exactly. So if we can fix it, then let's look towards how do we fix it. The problem is you have all the power right now weighted in Quebec and Ontario. Why would they want to give that up? They're not going to want to give that up. Thanks for listening. We're going to call it a day. If you enjoyed the format, please let us know. Please share your comments. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share with your friends. Hit the little bell for the notification so you get the next video. And I think we did good job.
I accept.
Hey!
Bye for now.